Amon-Ra St. Brown, the safest pick in the middle of the first round. We'll hear what Bob Harris has to say. Bob, what's the upside?
I think the upside is it's there, right? And he is the safest play. Once you get past the golden trio, the Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith and Jigba level, you're going to run right into Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had 117 catches, 1,401 yards, 11 touchdowns in his fifth season last year. Became the fourth player in NFL history to top 100 catches and 10 touchdowns in 3 straight seasons. His wide receiver 3 total points finish. He was wide receiver 4 in points per game. It was the 4th straight season he's been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. Can he keep it going? Well, Lions have been one of the NFC's most dangerous offensive teams thanks to an elite offensive line, which is not as elite as it was. Creative scheme, and we'll see if that continues with Drew Petzing and veteran leadership from Jared Goff. We'll see what happens with those changes, but Goff is the key here. St. Brown enjoyed a career high target share in 2025, 31.6%. That helped them to 13 top 20 fantasy outings with no major additions at wide out or tight end. I expect Goff to continue looking St. Brown's way consistently, and I think, if you're sitting there, you're saying, wow, man, Jackson Smith and Jigba is the best thing since sliced bread. He might be. Well, he was last year, but has he been as consistently as productive as Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's been inside the top 5 the last 3 years, including a wide receiver 2 finish, I believe, at one point. Perhaps you're getting the luck of the draw if you can land him, if you get your pick outside the top 5 or 6 and you land him. He's going at 7 overall as current ADP. I love him there. I think he's a super consistent play.
The downside, and this has to be put together, and it's a stretch, but I'll give it to you anyway. Drew Petzing comes in, and I was really disgusted by the way he used Marvin Harrison. Everything intermediate and deep, no easy underneath stuff. I worry that he's going to change St. Brown from the perfect role he had. And the other potential issue is, yes, interior offensive line was bad last year. Well, Taylor Decker, their former left tackle, retired. Now Penei Sewell moves there, but they drafted Blake Miller with the 17th pick in the draft. If Miller can't provide decent protection, and if Drew Petzing's going to use more of a downfield approach, that is the only thing that could slow St. Brown down. But that said, Bob, this is as safe as it gets, and remind everybody why they're taking St. Brown in the middle of that first round.
He's ranked no lower than 4th in catches, yards, and touchdowns in each of the last 3 seasons. Again, we've got top 10 fantasy wide receiver seasons, 3rd consecutive top 3 finish last year, including a wide receiver 2 overall finish in 2024. Jared Goff is going to continue to look his way consistently. And also, this just in, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's good.
That's Bob Harris. Running back had a disappointing rookie season, but much of it can be blamed by the coaching and offensive line in Las Vegas. JJ Zachariason will explain why Ashton Jeanty will give fantasy managers the production they wanted last year in his new situation.
Yeah, look, Ashton Jeanty was an elite prospect. I look at my prospect model, the ZAP model. He was one of the best that it's seen that dates back to 2011. And I have a year 2 model as well, which looks at how well players are going to perform in years 2 through 4. And Jeanty looks really good in that model as well. And you might be thinking, how is that the case when he wasn't great last year? If you look at his yards per carry, for instance, 3.7 yards per carry. But you have to keep in mind that system, that situation was just not great. He was 2nd lowest in yards before contact per attempt in the NFL, only ahead of Quinshot Judkins last year. According to PFF, that offensive line ranked 30th in run blocking last season. It was really a bad situation. And overall, when you're trying to look at what's predictive moving forward for these players, oftentimes, not often, most of the time, it's volume and not efficiency. The efficiency stuff really doesn't matter much at all for how running backs are going to perform in the future. You should be looking at volume, and Ashton Jeanty had volume. If you look at him, he had over an 80% running back rush share in that backfield last year, and then he saw a hefty target share as well. And if you look at all rookie running backs since 2011, who had as good of a running back rush share as Ashton Jeanty did, and as good of a target share as he did, there's only one that stands out that matched him, and it was Saquon Barkley, who obviously has been very, very strong, was a great prospect, and has been a strong fantasy asset as well. And now you move into 2026, Clint Kubiak, now the offensive coordinator. We're going to see a lot more of the outside zone runs that we love to see for fantasy football purposes. The offensive line gets Tyler Linderbaum in the middle. You get Colton Miller back, who's a huge piece of that offensive line. So really, I'm looking at this as an elite player with an offensive environment that should be a lot better, an offensive line that should look a lot better, and a coaching staff that's going to put a huge emphasis on that line and on that run game.
The only downside I could see would be situational. If the Raiders would potentially have a disgusting wide receiver room, if it's so bad, defenses have no respect for them, there could be a few weeks where there are duds during the season, but that's not the whole season. It might be a few duds. But like JJ said, this is a player you like. JJ, remind everybody the short form of why you draft Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, look, it's an elite prospect in a much better situation, a much better offensive line with a great coaching staff, and not much competition. And I'm going to lean into that all day long.
And that's the bottom line from JJ Zachariason. This wide receiver has averaged 889 yards over the last 3 years, but Matt Harmon is going to tell you why you should be drafting Jaylen Waddle.
Man, I love Jaylen Waddle this year in fantasy, and I think maybe the only reason to not like him for you is that I took him one pick in front of you in the Kings Classic draft. So maybe that's the possible downside here. But upside wise, man, I think people don't realize a few things about Jaylen Waddle. One, how good this guy is. He's one of the most efficient receivers on a per route basis over the last couple of years. Last year, of course, Tyreek Hill goes down. He doesn't have the big explosive season, does Jaylen Waddle. However, the Dolphins were dead last in plays run last year. Like, there just wasn't a lot of opportunity. Meanwhile, he goes to Denver, where they were a top 10 team in neutral dropback rate, plays run, all of that. The opportunity from an offensive ecosystem standpoint is a big jump up for Jaylen Waddle. They did not pay a first and a third round pick to not make him a featured player. And the other thing I think people don't realize about Jaylen Waddle is that in Miami, because they were role catering to Tyreek Hill, and then even when Tyreek Hill goes down, their second receivers like Malik Washington, who's kind of a deep name that I do appreciate his game, but he's a created touch type of player as well. So because of that, Waddle had to be the outside on ball X receiver over the last few seasons in Miami. He averaged over 75%, up to 80% sometimes of his snaps outside and on ball the last few years. That's not going to happen in Denver. That is going to be Courtland Sutton's role. So really, for the first time in Jaylen Waddle's career here with the Denver Broncos in his first season there, he's going to be the movement guy. He's going to be getting a lot more layup opportunities. Like, he's shown the ability to beat press man coverage, but he's also a really good zone beater. Jim, I straight up think this guy is the most mispriced player in fantasy football at the wide receiver position this year.
The only thing I can tell you at downside is a tough draw here is that there could be a number of games where Denver's defense and run game dominate, pass attempts bottom out, could be a few down games. Maybe the decreasing production 3 straight years is a thing. But other than that, Matt Harmon, just give the 5-second reminder of why people are drafting Waddle.
Jaylen Waddle is going to have the effect in Denver that Stephon Diggs had when he went to Buffalo. I saw Davis Webb make that comparison. Let the record show I made it on my podcast several months before then. So I think he and Bo Nix take the big jump together. I think Waddle is the most mispriced player in fantasy right now, wide receiver.
And that's the bottom line from Matt Harmon. Travis Etienne is gone, and will Bhayshul Tuten be the running back to own in Jacksonville? We'll find out from Mike Dempsey.
I think he will be the running back to own, Jim. The question is, by what degree, right? He's going in the 5th round in a lot of 12-team drafts right now. I think if you look at the upside for Bhayshul Tuten this year, there is a path to about 1,200 rushing yards, 10 to 12 combined touchdowns. I'm kind of looking at what Travis Etienne was able to do last year. Keep in mind, Bhayshul Tuten on limited touches had 7 TDs of his own last year. I think the greatest risk is, what is kind of the timeshare with Chris Rodriguez, because I do think that he is a factor to some degree.
The downside is 3.7 yards per carry and 83 carries, not much. And bottom 2% explosive run rate from a guy we thought was going to blow the doors off. And then, like you said, Chris Rodriguez, if he gets goal line. And then John Shipley from SI Sports Illustrated talking about LaQuint Allen maybe getting receiving work. We'll see. But remind people why they're drafting Bhayshul Tuten after we've just given the upside and the downside.
Well, there's no question that those numbers you cited are accurate, but 3.7 yards per carry on a limited sample, and some of that was short yardage work. Liam Cohen said yesterday that, actually, it was this morning. I'm sorry, this is as fresh as it gets. He was on our local station, and he said, look, I want Bhayshul sometimes to just forget about ball security. Okay, Bhayshul Tuten came in with the rep that he doesn't hang on to the football great. His first touch in OTAs last year went to the ground. Okay, so he had that on his mind. I think he was thinking through a lot of his runs last year. He's got that legit 4.3 speed. And, much like Liam Cohen told Trevor Lawrence, just let it rip about midseason last year, and you saw the results. I think that kind of attitude coming from his head coach is going to free him up mentally to at least hopefully achieve the upper end of those projections.
And that's the bottom line on Bhayshul Tuten from Mike Dempsey. 2025, Trey McBride was the overwhelming tight end one. But is there a new sheriff back in town? Dave Kluge's going to tell you about it.
Yeah, I cannot stop drafting Brock Bowers this year, and there are so many reasons for it. First of all, the Raiders' win total is set at 5.5 games right now. This is not going to be a good team, Jim. There's going to be a lot of garbage time here, and I just see Brock Bowers being the clear top target. When I look at the other guys here, Jalen Naylor, Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, those aren't guys that move the needle for me at all. Over the years, I've talked a lot about Clint Kubiak and his scheme. It is predicated on getting the ball to his primary pass catcher deep downfield where they are able to catch the ball and create after the catch, and that's exactly what Brock Bowers does. When we look at his rookie season, because he was hurt a little bit in year 2, but as a rookie, a 26% target share is unbelievable. Led all tight ends last year, even dealing with that PCL injury, still pulled a 24% target share, second only to Trey McBride. He was 6th among targets in all NFL players as a rookie, not just tight ends, all NFL players. This guy is a certified target hog, and he is so efficient with these opportunities. Last year, dealing with the injury, number 2 in air yard share, number 1 in red zone target share, number 2 in first read target share. This is a transcendent player who I think has an opportunity to lead the NFL in receptions this year.
The minor downside points to consider: 2 years in the league, 1 year a knee injury. The second minor downside point, there's a small world where defense could sell out so heavily because that wide receiver room looks pretty sketchy. But otherwise, that's about it. So, Dave, just a quick bottom line: why are you drafting Bowers with that premium pick?
This guy had the 5th most targets for a tight end in NFL history as a rookie. That was playing alongside Jacoby Myers, catching passes from Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Now there is no target competition and better quarterback play. We are going to see Brock Bowers have his best season in 2026.
That's the bottom line from Dave Kluge. In 2025, Saquon Barkley was one of the top running backs taken off the board. This year, we have a significant discount. Darren Armani is going to tell you why you should be drafting Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is that with the new offensive coordinator, with Sean Mannion, I think he's going to be one of the guys that benefits the most from that. The Eagles are expected to have a heavier running back scheme in 2026 under Mannion. They also have a favorable schedule for running backs, one of the top 5 easiest in the league. The playoff schedule for them, fantasy-wise, against Seattle and Houston isn't great, but those are home games, so that's still best-case scenario there. So they went from 26 runs per game in 2024 down to 22 in 2025. So we should see an increase there, and fewer running attempts for Hurts in this scheme means even more of a shift to Barkley. So I'm thinking maybe 20 more carries for this season. He went from 345 carries in 2026 all the way down to 280 in 2024. So we should still see him hovering above that 300 carry mark. There's going to be better yards per carry with the motion and play action we should see in this new offense. And he should catch more passes as well because Mannion's offense, coming from that coaching tree, it emphasizes check downs, swing passes, screens. So he had 37 receptions last year. I think he could approach, 45, between 45 and 50. Don't expect significantly more red zone work because Hurts is still a factor there. But just the compiling of the rushing and receiving stats is going to add up for Barkley. So he's a guy I would really target. His ADP right now in the FFPC tournaments is going like early second round. So that's really a good spot to capitalize on his discount.
The only downside I can find is with A.J. Brown gone, can the Eagles keep defense from creeping up to the line to overplay the run? Also, last year, a lot of injuries on the Eagles' offensive line, especially Lane Johnson. There could be a small level of concern that if these players don't get back to full health, it may not be the force it once was. But Darren Armani, remind people very quickly why they're drafting Saquon Barkley.
He is a bell cow back that you can get in the early second round. So if you're drafting between those 9 and 12 positions, you really are in a great spot. You, depending on what falls to you, you could take an elite receiver there and then come back with Barkley in the second round. Or a lot of people seem to be going double hero RB, and you could really stack those two positions or the running backs and then just slam wide receivers for quite a while after that.
And that's the bottom line from Darren Armani. Quarterback missed 8 games last year, but Julia Papworth is going to tell you why you should be drafting one Brock Purdy.
So let's talk about Brock Purdy. Look, the electrical substation has taken yet another soul with Ricky Pearsall. We know, or we think we know, that he's going to be gone for the season. Well, you know what? Deebo Samuel's in to save the day. No, he's not in to save the day, but I think that potentially losing Ricky Pearsall is going to give Brock Purdy even more of a dip. And I think this is a time that you can buy this dip and get a very reliable quarterback. I think people forget how good Purdy is. I mean, you were saying it right there. Like, he missed an abundance of games last season, but when he came back, he had a 70% completion rate. That was second in the NFL. And he had a 7-point touchdown rate, which was also second in the NFL. And he delivered last season in the playoffs, which is when you wanted him. Quarterback 5, quarterback 4, and quarterback 1. The thing about the San Francisco 49ers, since there's only 3 teams in the NFC West this season, it might be 3 teams for a while. I'm saying this as an Arizona Cardinals fan. Those 3 are going to be fighting really hard. It's going to be an insanely good division. And, you know, any team with Shanahan at the helm, even though he might not be there as much, he too is taking some hurt for the team. That team is going to be fighting. Whoever they put in there, they make work. And I think right now Purdy is around quarterback 13. I think he's going to drop. He's probably going to be like 15 or 16. He's going in the middle of the 9th round. I think he'll drop to the 10th, maybe the 11th. People are going to be off him. I think he's going to be healthier this season. He had that turf toe that kept him out. He was re-aggravating everything. I think that the way they will use Deebo will take some of the pressure off Purdy. You're going to get a lot more dump downs. You're going to get a lot little 5-6 yard passes. Deebo will take it, 30, 40 yards. If he's still got any of that yak left in him, he's been working out. And then all of a sudden those numbers are going to go on Purdy's stats, right? I think maybe you pair him with somebody a little bit earlier, right? He's a great second quarterback to have, but I would still take him over. I'm probably still going to take him over Baker Mayfield. A lot of people are going to take Jordan Love over Brock Purdy. I think I'm still going to take Brock Purdy. I think he is worth buying this dip. I think there will be a dip out there, and I think the value, and that's the keyword in drafts, right? Like everybody is good at the right price. So am I taking Brock Purdy in the 5th round? No, I'm not.
Exactly. And you baked it in. So the downside, really, you baked it in. Yes, they are going to play top 10 defenses, probably the Rams twice, and Seattle has probably have those defenses. He averaged 14.2 against them. But like you said, pick another quarterback with him. Weapons could disappear with injuries and age. Evans, Kittle, CMC, Pearsall, Kirk, and Deebo, all questionable. But that said, give us a 5-second reminder of why you're drafting Brock Purdy.
Look, the Niners also have the 8th easiest strength of schedule, according to Warren Sharp. I love how that is lining up for him. He is a great base level quarterback. You're going to get a steady score there with him every week, and you can kind of spend your money elsewhere. You can go for the upside on some of the other people. He's a dependable man.
And that's the bottom line from Julia Papworth. New Orleans Saints shelled out big money to bring in Travis Etienne as their lead back. But Howard Bender's going to tell you why you should fade Travis Etienne.
I do not believe in this guy one bit right now, and it has nothing to do with him or his talent level. It has everything to do with the scheme that Kellen Moore runs in New Orleans. My biggest problem with Travis Etienne, aside from the fact that you got to put a little Cajun on his name now, apparently, is the fact that he is not a between the tackles guy. He's not a bruising north-south runner. He is not that running back. So not only do you have Alvin Kamara still sitting there with the New Orleans Saints, but you also have Devin Neal and you've got Audric Estime, 2 guys who are actual north-south runners there. And then you've got Travis Etienne, who's going to probably take a good amount of outside zone running work, sure, but that's probably about it for him as far as really how much volume he's going to see is really unknown. And one of the biggest aspects is everybody starts talking about Travis Etienne. He's going to catch all these passes. Kellen Moore does not throw to his running backs. I've said this time and time again. He didn't do it for Tony Pollard. He didn't do it for Austin Eckler. He didn't even do it for Saquon Barkley. He handed the ball off to Barkley a ton, but he didn't throw the football to Saquon Barkley. And I think that's something that people are forgetting a lot of. So with other backs in the house here in New Orleans and Travis Etienne not being a real strong bruising between the tackles type guy, I do worry about his production this year. I'm out.
The only upside I can give is somehow, some way, in different ways in 3 or 4 years, Travis Etienne has gotten at least 1,399 scrimmage yards and averaged 11 touchdowns. Every year it's been a different way he's done it. Somehow volume has been king for him, but that is the only piece of upside I can find. Howard, remind everybody why to fade Travis Etienne.
Well, again, there's crowded backfield. He's not going to catch any passes, and he's not a bruising between the backs north-south runner. Stay away from Travis Etienne unless he falls a good 2 or 3 rounds past ADP.
And that's the bottom line from Howard Bender. Running back lost up to 40% of the snaps to his backups, but Pete Nova's going to tell you why you should be drafting Chase Brown in 2026.
Yeah, Chase Brown is a player that last year to start the season, weeks 1 through 7, just 10.5 fantasy points per game. Everybody knows a major disappointment. He was a player that, I mean, people were pulling their hair out, trying to trade him, trying to find ways to move off of him because things just weren't working. You had the Joe Burrow injury. They had some backup quarterbacks. You had some Samaje Perine kind of filtering into the mix there. But weeks 8 through 17 last year, 21.46 fantasy points per game. I think one of the big things with Chase Brown, and I try to do this with when it comes to projecting out players for the following year, is what situations have changed, what situations have stayed the same. When you look at an elite offense like the Bengals, right, this is a situation that's really stayed the same. I do expect them to go under center a little bit more. We've heard some rumblings about that, and I do think the defense has gotten better. So those are some things that could maybe change a little bit about the style of them throwing as much as they have and being high octane. But the truth is there's so many playmakers on this team. And when you think about Chase Brown, he's not a 3-down back, typical prototypical Adrian Peterson type of guy, but he's a player that does not have strong competition behind him, right? And he's working with 2 alphas on the outside and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. That just opens up everything, right? There's so much room to run for him. And now Joe Flacco has came back. So if Joe Burrow does go down, they have a strong contingency plan to, slot in a quarterback to kind of keep the ship going. And we know Flacco can push the ball down the field to continue to create space for a guy like Chase Brown. He's a guy that I have projected and as high as the 1-2 turn in my points per game projections. I think he's a really, really nice value in early drafts. And he's someone I'm very happy to be drafting.
Yeah, the only downside to consider, again, if they decide to limit the snaps, because last year the efficiency was insane. If that efficiency slides, the other thing is durability. We know he played 17 games last year. We know he only missed 1 game in 2024, but it was a week 18 high ankle sprain, and he probably would have missed a month. And then he missed 5 games as a rookie. But other than that, a lot of upside. Pete, remind us why everybody should be taking Chase Brown that 1-2 turn.
Take Chase Brown, elite offense, a player that's going to get a lot of room to run, and a player that is insulated with the quarterbacks on his roster. Super excited to get a guy that's going to get 90 targets is my bold prediction this year.
That's the bottom line from Pete Nova. This player missed 18 games in the last 2 years, but Andrew Cooper's going to tell you why you need to draft Chris Godwin.
Let's go, baby. Chris Godwin. And here's the thing. This is a guy going off the board outside the top 40 wide receivers, right, Jim? Why do we pick the wide receiver 5? Because we hope he finishes wide receiver 5. We're cool with that. Guys drafted in this range, we're not cool with that. We need bigger upside. The wide receiver 30 last year was who? Like Troy Franklin? We're picking guys in that range because we believe they have special upside. And a guy like Chris Godwin has finished wide receiver 2 in this league. The year before last, just 1 year ago, he was the wide receiver 2 in points per game behind only Jamar Chase, right? He went back to operating out of the slot with Liam Cohen there. Liam Cohen famously was part of the crew that orchestrated the best fantasy football season of all time for a wide receiver, right? When Cooper Kupp ran the 6th most slot routes of any player from the slot with the Rams. And guess what? You know who else was on that squad as a coach? Zach Robinson. They brought in Zach Robinson. They said, hey, your buddy Liam Cohen, we loved what he did when he was here. Baker Mayfield was at his best. Chris Godwin was at his best. Come back here, come over and run that scheme, and we're going to get back to it. And I even, I checked with, or we at least all heard from the coach who said that Chris Godwin's going to be playing the slot, that Emeka Egbuka is going to be playing the Z. I also checked with Greg Allman, a respected beat writer, covered the team for 13 years. I asked him, who do you think is going to be leading this team in snaps? He said Godwin and Egbuka. But I'm looking at Godwin and I'm like, okay, Baker Mayfield's healthy. He's healthy. They're bringing back the scheme where he had his best success. Why can't this guy be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football and he's going outside the top 40, Jim?
The only downside I get on Godwin is he is tied to Baker Mayfield. And Baker Mayfield, who always plays, but he plays hurt often. When Mayfield's hurt, he struggles. That's a potential downside. Godwin will be 30 and a half years old as the season starts. Wear and tear could catch up. But Coop, why are you drafting Chris Godwin?
Even as August creeps along, maybe he'll get up to wide receiver 38, 35. He's just never going to get to a point where I'm not willing to click that button, because all I care about in that range is upside, baby.
And that's the bottom line from Andrew Cooper. He was at his best in the fantasy football playoffs last year, and Tony Cutillo is going to tell you why Chris Olave is worth the expensive draft cost in 2026.
Oh man, I'm excited, man. I love the OSU alum, and this what I'm looking at, Jim. It's very simple to me. It's career highs across the board, right? Career high, 156 targets in this offense, 100 catches, 1163.9. But the thing is, it's the mindset. Tyler Shook, right? Tyler Shook, when he entered into the contest, guess what? Wide receiver 3 for Olave. And I know a lot of people want to talk about Jordan Tyson. I get it, but he's still a rookie. I don't buy in to rookies really diving in. And one last thing I'll say, Jim, on this, the yardage, I think, goes up to that 1,300 marks. I feel like he's still going to be exactly where he's being drafted at.
The only downside I see isn't Olave related. It's Tyler Shough related. Shough had 4 very good games down the stretch, but he played 4 teams that lacked a pass rush. And I noticed on film that Shough held the ball a long time. So if defenses saw that film and heat him up, we could see a regression from Shough. But outside of that, Chris Olave is a superstar. And Tony, give a quick reminder of why you will draft Chris Olave at that expensive cost.
And I'll give you one really good statistic that I love. 27% target share last year. Okay, that was with Puka Nacua and Jamar Chase. And the last thing, I really like these off the wall comments, but he's being mentored on and off the field by the great Michael Thomas. So I just love this all the way around.
And that's the bottom line from Tony Cutillo. Watson has never had that big season, but somebody thinks he will. What do you think, Eric Balkman?
We're in a buying window right now for Christian Watson, a player that is going to be the beneficiary of no Romeo Doubs on this team this year, a beneficiary of no Dontavian Wicks on this team this year. You also have a case where Josh Jacobs right now is still dealing with some legal stuff. And even if you take out the legal aspect of this, Jim, there's signs of decline last season. Now, whether that was particularly because of injury, I don't know. I do know that there's a lot of question marks on the offensive line this year as well for Green Bay. And I don't know if Matt LaFleur is going to be able to run the ball as much and as efficiently as this team has done in years prior. So I think you have to look at Watson still having this injury stigma where, people just think he's a soft tissue injury waiting to happen. If we go back a couple of years after he went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison to have his legs looked at to find out why he was having all these quad and hamstring issues, they found out that one was significantly, I think 20% stronger than the others. And that was a big issue for him, why he was always coming up late. They've fixed that. They've given him treatment. And since then, there's been no soft tissue injuries for Watson that caused him to miss any games. He did have the torn ACL, but I think that's pretty unpredictable when it comes to that. But it goes into why you can get him at a bargain price. He has moved up, but you're still soaking a late 5th round pick. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 3 right now for a guy that could be the lead wide receiver on a team that could be involved in more shootouts than you'd think, especially with Micah Parsons not expected to play until mid-October now. Watson might figure into this scheme for the Packers more efficiently than you might think. And as a result, he's going to be a bigger fantasy factor this year as well.
The downside case, obviously never played more than 14 games in a year, hasn't had more than 35 catches in a year or more than 611 yards. All that said, the stars seem to be lining up right, but the fact he's never done it is the downside case. But Balky, give us a quick reminder of why you are drafting Christian Watson.
Downside could be a good reason why you draft him, because that downside's causing him to have his depression in draft ADP right now. So take advantage while you can and get some Christian Watson.
Running back is no longer the number 2 running back in a committee. Colby Conway will tell you why you should be drafting David Montgomery.
David Montgomery's absolute stud this year, Jim. I don't know how else to say it. And I know you're going to present some downside, so I'm going to 8-mile this Eminem style right up front. He doesn't catch passes. He's a far better pass catcher than people give him credit for. Oh, Woody Marks is there. Woody Marks nearly averaged more trips to the blue tent than he did yards per carry last season. Like, all you saw from Woody Marks last year was the underdog. Woody Marks, insert body part, has left the tent or went to the tent. That is it. And when you look at this offense, you want to look last year in Nick Caley's first year. They ran 11 personnel at one of the highest rates. That is not going to happen. That was out of necessity last year. They had a beat up Dalton Schultz and no other tight end. They had to go to 11 personnel. This year, they are going to do more with the tight ends. Look what they did up front. They added multiple offensive linemen, all of whom are better run blockers than pass blockers. They overdrafted Marlon Klein in the second round, but he's an athletic guy who can block. This team wants to run the football. They have been telling you that all offseason. It is a defensive-minded team. They want to run the football. They run more man gap concept runs, which David Montgomery has excelled in his career, including having the 4th best mark in that department last season. And if you look here too, over on DraftKings Sportsbook, 824.5 rushing yards, 7.5 rushing touchdowns. Those numbers are on par with Chase Brown, Cam Scadaboo, Ken Walker, all of those guys. David Montgomery is set up for a monster season. He is going way too cheap in drafts for his expected workload in 2026.
The only downside I see, Colby, is the Texans definitely work to address the offensive line. If those changes don't help, Montgomery had issues in Detroit with a bad interior line. We'll see how that shakes out. Also, if the Houston offense doesn't score a lot of points, the touchdown opportunities may be limited. But that's all I could come up with for a downside case. Colby, give everybody the 5-second version of why they're drafting David Montgomery.
Clear-cut lead back for a team that wants to run the football. And if I'm not mistaken, they are favored in 13 of their games this season. He's going to be the grinder for this offense. You want David Montgomery in 2026.
And that's the bottom line from Colby Conway. Wide receiver played second fiddle in the Eagles offense the last few seasons. Frank Ammirante will explain why this is the time to draft Devonta Smith.
Let's keep it simple. Devonta Smith's a talented wideout who finally is thrust into opportunity as the clear-cut top target in the Eagles passing game. Philly's bringing in Sean Mannion as new offensive coordinator. That's a massive upgrade over Kevin Cutillo, who is, let's face it, a lethargic play caller. Smith's in a spot to succeed. I'm paying a premium for him. Like last year, JSN, we thought the same question marks. Could JSN be a number 1 wideout with DK Metcalf? And he answered with flying colors. I think Smith, maybe not to the same level as JSN, but he could thrive in the same way. And I'm willing to pay a premium for him early in the 3rd round, even late 2nd round.
The one downside thing, and this is more on a game-per-game basis, if the Eagles' defense is dominant as we expect, and if the offensive line returns to health this year. I remember times in 2024 where the Eagles did not throw the ball in the second half. So you may get a few games where Eagles don't throw the ball in the second half. But otherwise, and other than that, Frank, remind everyone why they're drafting Devonta Smith.
Yeah, A.J. Brown's gone. It's Devonta Smith's time to shine. His first time as the top target for the Eagles since his rookie year. Don't overthink this one.
And that's the bottom line from Frank Ammirante. This player is coming back from a serious knee injury, but Stacy Perez will let you know why you need to draft Tucker.
You should be definitely drafting Tucker Kraft. As quoted from him today at training camp where he was activated off the PUP list, I'm like a tricycle. I don't come with brakes. All right. Tucker Kraft is going to be ready to go for the season. Just remember what he did last year when he got hurt in week 8. At that point, he had almost 500 yards, 6 touchdowns. He was on pace for almost 1,200 yards. And if he had been able to stay healthy and kept going for the season, we would be talking about him alongside Trey McBride and Brock Bowers this year. So this is a player that you're going to get a little bit of a discount on. And that's why you should be drafting him this year. Don't worry about that injury. He's going to come back strong and come back firing and ready to go, just like he was last season.
And really, the only downside I can offer is just the small percentage uncertainty of coming back as a yards after catch beast from ACL surgery. But again, right now, it looks pretty good. Stacy, Perez, give the 5-second version of why the draft Tucker Kraft.
Tucker Kraft is our Yak King. He had 15.63 yards per reception last year. That is going to be coming back this year, 18% target share before he went out for injury. Look for him to have similar numbers this coming season.
And that's the bottom line from Stacy Perez. Running back was a league winner in 2025. Dave Richards going to tell you why he's not. Dave, talk about Christian McCaffrey.
We know about the workload that he's coming off of last year, 450 touches. The track record of running backs with 400 or more touches in the season just isn't very good. There's been 17 of them to do it over the last 16 years. And of the 17 with 400 plus touches, including Saquon Barkley last year, Jim, only 3 outperformed their ADP. 4 were about as good as they were the year before. And the remaining 10 either fell short because they sat out the season. Thanks a lot, Le'Veon Bell. Got hurt, and that includes Christian McCaffrey in 2020, or saw at least a 20% drop in their fantasy point per game average. And Saquon was one of those guys that stayed healthy, but we saw his drop go more than 30% from where it was in 2024. Throw on top of that Christian McCaffrey's been here before. He's had 400 plus touches in 2 prior seasons. And the years after those seasons, he got hurt pretty quickly, missed a lot of time. Fantasy managers lost because they didn't have CMC on the field playing for them. And did I mention that he's 30? That's usually the age that we start worrying about running backs taking a downturn. And we already know that last year, career high in targets per game, 7.6. It's going to take a lot more injuries than just Ricky Pearsall and Christian Kirk going down for San Francisco for McCaffrey to see that type of target volume again. And we know his rushing efficiency was terrible last year. So unless he continues to be this healthy workhorse at age 30, when his track record says that he hasn't done it before, and the history of the running back position says that the chances aren't very good, I think fantasy managers need to take a real cautious approach. At bare minimum, understand the risk you're taking with Christian McCaffrey as a mid to late first round pick. And then if you're into this, safeguard the pick. Because those 49ers running backs, they can be pretty good. Look for Kalen Black in the double-digit rounds to back up McCaffrey just in case CMC misses time like he did the last 2 times he had 400 plus touches.
The upside is maybe he transitions to a full-time receiver, 102 catches last year. And if he does that, avoids the workload, maybe he sets an NFL record for receiving. But that said, not a lot of upside case here. And Dave, give the 5-second version of why you're fading McCaffrey.
Well, the upside case is what he does when he is healthy, but the fade is that he's older, he's coming off of a big workload, and it's just tough to trust a guy, given his history and the history of the position, to do it again.
And that's the bottom line from Dave Richards. Running back played through a knee injury in 2025, and Iggy Gilbert is going to tell you why you should go back in on drafting Josh Jacobs in 2026.
Yeah, we're talking about a LaFleur offense here. Jacobs has been there the past 2 seasons, a little bit of off-season trouble. We really don't know. That's caused his ADP to dip a little bit. But let me tell you something, 32 games in Green Bay, 535 rushing attempts, 2,258 combined yards. Even though there was a slight dip last year, he still has 15 and 13 touchdowns, 28 combined touchdowns. That's what we want in fantasy football. And I know everybody's like, well, he's just a runner. He doesn't catch. He's had 36 receptions each of the past 2 seasons. So he's getting a little bit of that bump in PPR. There is really no viable backup. Emmanuel Wilson was a better backup than people realize. He's gone and he's in Seattle. So we're going to have to rely on Chris Brooks and Marshawn Lloyd, who hasn't been able to stay healthy his entire NFL career. So you have a clear-cut RB1 case there. And like I said, he wants to run the football, man. You got a healthy Tucker Kraft. It's going to pull the safety out a little bit. It's going to open up that box for Jacobs a little bit. They want to run the ball. Even with these premier wide receivers, they're going to want to run the ball. And guess what? He's in a contract year, Jim. So he's going to want to ball out, get one more contract. That's my upside on Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, and the downside, the line was horrible last year. They lost 2 starters. So we'll see how that shakes out. But otherwise, just remind people in the real quickest format why they're drafting Josh Jacobs.
He's an elite running back, and when the NFC North, that interior defensive line is hurting for Chicago, Detroit, and Minnesota. So you got 6 division games. He could have 100+ and a touchdown. How about riding that for upside?
And that's the bottom line from Iggy Gilbert. This running back started to share time after dominating the Rams' backfield for a couple years. But Michael Hoff will let you know why 2026 is still a great time to buy in on Kyren Williams.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is you look at Kyren Williams and you look at Blake Corum. A lot of people want to wish Kyren away because they believe in Blake Corum. You look at those final few weeks. Yes, we saw Blake Corum get 56 rushing attempts. Kyren Williams in that same time still had 76 rushing attempts. Hadn't had a fumble since week 5. So there's no real reason as to why this workload, why Blake Corum got a larger workload. There's not a losing faith in Kyren. They just gave him a contract extension last summer. So to me, Kyren Williams, top 10 running back in each of the last 3 seasons. I see a world in which both running backs can be good. You look at 2023, 2024, Detroit Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs, Dave Montgomery. Both running backs had double-digit rushing touchdowns. I think we need to focus on just because one running back can be good doesn't mean the other one cannot be good. We're also talking about Kyren Williams is the only running back with at least 250 PPR points in each of the last 3 seasons. It's not a Derrick Henry. It's not a Christian McCaffrey. It's a Kyren Williams. So to me, for where he's going in drafts, now it's all about roster construction. I get that. But to me, I'm not scared off of Kyren Williams when you're talking about Blake Corum. That's the real conversation when we're talking about Kyren Williams.
The only downside concern is if Corum starts cutting into passing down and goal line work. Right now, like you said, Mike, it's dominated by Williams. As long as that doesn't happen, Williams sails. But that's the only possible downside scenario. So remind people, Mike, why they're drafting Kyren Williams.
You're drafting Kyren Williams because he's in one of the best offenses in the NFL, and you have Matthew Stafford, who threw for 46 touchdown passes last year, most of his career, and the first time he's had 40 since 2021. Those touchdowns should go down, and if they go down, they can go to both Williams and Corum. This will still keep Williams in the top 12 running backs. That's why you're drafting.
And that's the bottom line for Michael Hoff. Player has gotten a bad rap for dropping the football, but Jorge Edwards is going to tell you why you must draft Quentin Johnson in 2026 drafts.
Well, let's talk about Quentin Johnson. We look at the ADP on Sleeper, currently wide receiver 46, 109 overall. 2025, weeks 1 through 4, when Joe Alt was still healthy, we saw Quentin Johnson, 19.9 points per game in PPR, 4 touchdowns, 84.3 receiving yards. Then all of a sudden, Joe Alt goes down due to injury. Justin Herbert's running for his life. Inconsistency the rest of the season. In fact, the rest of the season, he only had 5 double-digit PPR points in those games. You look now to 2026, the Chargers bring in offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel, and one of the first signings they did is bring over Alec Ingold from the Dolphins, who is their fullback now. And now we're going to see potentially a shift from 11 personnel where you have 3 wide receivers on the field to now 21 personnel with 2 wide receivers on the field and a running back and halfback, which means more consolidation at the receiver position, but potentially decrease in snaps. But that's good for Quentin Johnson because he and Ladd McConkey are going to be those 2 beneficiaries on the field. Now, what you have here for Quentin Johnson, one of the things that I'm most excited about is one of the hallmarks of Mike McDaniel's offenses is utilizing pre-snap motion. You're trying to get these wide receivers to avoid getting jammed at the line. And going back to 2025, without pre-snap motion, Quentin Johnson was actually the fourth in wide receiver on the team in average separation score. Not what you want to see. You want to see him avoiding, getting these jams and being more productive. Now, and also in 2025, with pre-snap motion and playing in 21 personnel, that we're projecting that to be the shift there that the Chargers are leaning towards. Wide receiver 1 in average separation score, wide receiver 1 in win rate versus coverage. So, if this is the philosophy that the Chargers are going towards, QJ could be a really huge breakout for wide receivers this season. You look at for the Chargers, you look at the wide receivers going around him at ADP. Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings is starting to make some noise. Michael Pittman, which I think is the best, wide receiving option on the Steelers overall amongst other wide receivers. I'd rather have QJ. Wan'Dale Robinson, what do we expect from Cam Ward? We don't know. So in terms of like being on a team, that has the greatest opportunity to produce points. The scheme is favoring what he does best. There's a lot of upside here for Quentin Johnson.
The potential downside that I have to wonder about, and we won't know this till deep into camp, it's a copycat NFL. And I noticed the Chargers not just have 2 fullbacks, but they have 3 good tight ends on the roster. And if Mike McDaniel is going to steal a page from Sean McVay's playbook, starting in week 9 after the bye last week, the Rams were playing 46 to 50% 3 tight end sets, which meant there was 1 wide receiver on the field. Across town, Puka Nacua, different team, was seeing 62% of the snaps until Adams hurt his hamstring. If that copycat league goes to Mike McDaniel, and if McDaniel's using either the 3 tight ends or a fullback and 2 tight ends, that means 1 receiver's off the field. And it's not always going to be Ladd McConkey or it's going to be Quentin Johnson, but there could be a snap it. Watch that during the preseason, but Jorge is going to remind you why you must draft Quentin Johnston.
So really simple. You have 2 healthy tackles returning, protecting Justin Herbert, bringing more consistency to that passing game, putting more time in the pocket to find Quentin Johnson down the field. The consolidated target share, no more Keenan Allen. So it literally is Quentin Johnson and Ladd McConkey. Again, scheming him to prevent him from getting jammed at the line of scrimmage. Compare that to all the other wide receivers going around his ADP. He has the most upside.
And that's the bottom line from Jorge Edwards. Player has yet to have the dominant season we all wanted, but Joe Dolan's going to tell you why you need to draft T. Higgins in 2026.
Yeah, so it's really simple for me, Jim. T. Higgins played 12 games in 2025 with a Joe starting at quarterback, whether that be Burrow or Flacco. I am not one of the Bengals starting quarterbacks. But in those 12 games, he averaged 13.7 fantasy points per game, roughly the equivalent of Chris Olave, who was the wide receiver 9. And it was just the 3 games that Jake Browning played in which Higgins averaged 5.5 fantasy points per game that dropped him to the wide receiver 12. And this is the same guy, by the way, who finished as the wide receiver 4 in the same scoring in 2024. And you're telling me you can get him in the 3rd round? I think on FFPC high stakes, you can get this guy in the 4th round. Sign me up. Now, I don't think the Bengals are sending out any signals at all this offseason that they're going to change their stripes, no pun intended. They did run the 2nd most plays in the NFL with 2 or more wide receivers on the field, but even supposing they did change their stripes, Higgins is going to be out there in 2 wide receiver sets. And at the goal line, this is where he really shines. He is a touchdown scorer. Over the last 2 seasons, Higgins is 6th among all wide receivers with 27 end zone targets, even 1 ahead of Jamar Chase, and he's behind only Devonta Adams in the number of those targets that were converted into touchdowns. 12 of 27 end zone targets have been converted into touchdowns for T. Higgins. Over that span of the last 2 seasons, only Devonta Adams, Marvin Harrison Jr., strangely enough, and Mike Evans averaged more than Higgins' 1 end zone target per game. Joe Burrow trusts him to score touchdowns, and in the event Joe Flacco has to come in, he trusts T. Higgins to score touchdowns as well. I do believe this is a mispriced player in one of the NFL's pass-heaviest offenses.
The only downside I can give you is that Higgins has missed 12 games across the last 3 seasons. You never know when those are going to happen. 2 concussions second half of 2025, and also the Joe Burrow thing. He's missed significant time in 3 of 6 years, but that's all the downside I can come up with. So Joe Dolan, give us the 5-second version reminding people why you need to draft T. Higgins.
Bengals score points, T. Higgins scores touchdowns.
And that's the bottom line from Joe Dolan. Strife and injuries led this receiver to a rare, disappointing season. Doug Orth will break down why this is the time to buy back in on Terry McLaurin.
While I recognize that we have yet to see Jaden Daniels and McLaurin operate together in a non-Cliff Kingsbury offense, I think we can count on new OC David Blau to doing something that seemingly every other NFL play caller except for Kingsbury does, and that's allow McLaurin to work somewhere else besides the left perimeter of the formation. So we operate with very cautious, almost trepidation when we're talking about dropping players from offenses that are being run by first-time play callers. But I don't really think it requires that much faith in Blau to get his unquestioned top target the ball as much as possible. And of course, we've heard him talk about it. I realize much has changed over the last 2 seasons, but the bull case for McLaurin has to include the fact that he popped off for career highs of 13 touchdowns and a 70.1% catch rate the 1 year he had a decent quarterback throwing him the ball, which was, of course, 2024 and Daniel's rookie season. But while age is starting to become a concern for him, and he's already 30 years old, and injuries were a problem last year, as you already mentioned, I think we can blame the latter on reporting late. And then I'll say, last but not least, I think both of us would agree that while the defense should be improved this year, the Commanders will be lucky to field a top half of the league defense in any facet. So that, of course, means we should be getting a bit more of a lean toward the passing game and hopefully some negative game scripts.
The downside potential is speculation. David Blau is going to go to an under center play action attack instead of the spread that Jayden Daniels excelled in. And the only question is, we have no idea if that is in Jayden Daniels' sweet spot in the NFL. If that doesn't work out and the coach doesn't adjust, it could cause a bit of a problem. But Doug, remind everyone why you need to draft Terry McLaurin.
Well, the guy, okay, hashtag good at football, number one, and we don't question the route running. I do think it will be more of a slower paced offense. I would come back to the fact that target share is going to be astronomical. That's usually the mark you're looking for when it comes to alpha receivers.
And that's the bottom line from Doug Orr. Tight end is being selected as the third one off the board, but Joe Bond will tell you of the downside of Colston Loveland.
Yeah, look, we all know he's talented. I'm not gonna deny that. I think he's gonna be very good. My issue is where he's getting drafted. The ADP around him, he's going around guys like Ladd McConkey and T. Higgins and Luka and Scatterboo and Waddle. These guys have immense upside. Like would any of those guys, would you be surprised if any of those guys finish as a wide receiver one? No. Loveland is great, right? But he still does have a very crowded team, right? There is still two very, very good receivers there in Odunze and Burden. It's got a really good run game as well. So I know everybody looks at the very end of the season last year and goes, oh man, he was great. He was tight end too. It's like off two really, really good games and the rest were just kind of blah. The average per game during that 9-week stretch actually had him as tight end 6, I think. And so I'm just a little hesitant to draft him where he's going. If he was going 2 rounds later, I might pull the trigger.
Yeah, the only downside they come up with is this. The Bears got a lot of turnovers from their defense last year. Otherwise, it's a bad unit. If they're trailing in most games and they have to throw and Caleb Williams makes a jump, and of course, Colston Loveland, if he's using that Sam Laporta role, but with a ton of targets, that would be the upside case. But Joe Bond remind everybody why that cost is just too harsh for Colston Loveland.
Look, you only need to start one tight end, and unless you get the elites, Bowers, McBride, I think that's the only way to go. Otherwise, wait, get depth at that range where Loveland's going, and you will do much better with your teams.
That's the bottom line from Joe Bond. First round draft pick, but Marcus Grant is not buying. Marcus, tell us about Jeremiah Love.
Well, Jeremiah Love, obviously a really talented player. Watched him during his collegiate years, and we can see the talent. There's no doubt about it. There's a reason that everybody's drafting this guy as the number 1 pick in dynasty leagues right now. But I'm telling you, I'm a little bit worried about him. I feel like we've forgotten the lessons of Ashton Jeanty already, right? This time last year, everybody was so excited about Ashton Jeanty. We could see the talent there. We were super excited about the situation, and it sort of blew up in our faces. Not because Ashton Jeanty wasn't talented, but he went to a really bad situation there with the Las Vegas Raiders. He was last in the league in terms of yards before contact. Basically, every time Ashton Jeanty got the ball, there was a defender in his face. And I feel like we're going to go through the same situation with Jeremiah Love down there in Arizona, where the offensive line is bad. I know they tried to improve it, but I'm still not optimistic just yet. It's a defense that's bad, which means this is a team that's going to be playing from behind in the second half, which means a lot of the upside is capped because they're going to be throwing the football. What makes it even worse, though, than Jeanty's situation, last year there was really no competition for touches in the Raiders' backfield. This year, he's got to deal with Tyler Algier. I mean, talk to anybody who's drafted Bijan Robinson over the last couple of years, and they can tell you how frustrating it is to have Tyler Algier there in that backfield. On top of that, at least as of now, James Conner is still an Arizona Cardinal. I get it. He's a little bit older. He's had injury issues. He's been productive for this team, and I just don't see a world where they immediately just jettison him off to the side. So now you've got a bad offense, a bad offensive line, and a lot of competition for touches. It's not something I really want to be a part of, at least not at the ADP folks are paying for him.
In terms of the upside, all I could say is this. If Arizona, for the first time in 100 years, makes a good decision, they'll pay to draft capital and give him touches. If he gets that, volume's king. So, Marcus, your point stands. Give us a quick hit as to why you're fading Jeremiah Love.
Just fading him, just again, talented player, but in a bad situation. And I think sometimes situation matters a lot more than talent. And this is one that, at least at cost, I'm staying away from.
That's the bottom line from Marcus Grant. The Chiefs shelled out big money to solve their running back issues the past couple of years. Dustin Ludke will tell you why fantasy managers should avoid this trap.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker just isn't going to have the volume that everybody thinks he does. We've been waiting for this heir apparent to Jamal Charles and Priest Holmes. But under Andy Reid, only twice have running backs had over 225 carries on a season, never with Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator. And if Kenneth Walker, who wasn't real great, he just doesn't. He has only over 3.5 yards a carry in 36% of his games, just not real efficient and has some injury concerns. I don't see how you can buy him right now at RB14 when he's never finished higher than RB18. And we've never seen a Kansas City running back since Jamal Charles. Kareem Hunt was RB4, RB12 in 2018, 2017. You have to go that far back to find someone who finished as RB14 or better. So I'm out on Kenneth Walker right now.
You're going to need a little voodoo to make the upside case here because Kenneth Walker has always been a runner that dances and looks for a hole. The Kansas City strength of the offensive line is the interior, and defense is always worried about Patrick Mahomes. If Kenneth Walker can solve a career-long problem of looking for a running hole and just getting downhill, that big season is in play. But for that to happen, it's an incredible leap of faith for a runner who had a 25th percentile success rate, but that's the only path I see. Dustin, remind people why they should fade Kenneth Walker in short form.
Yeah, you're just not going to see the volume that you want to see for a top-end running back. Bad offensive line, bad volume on a not real super efficient runner. I'm out.
And that's the bottom line from Dustin Ludke. This receiver's two big games came against the hapless defenses of the 49ers and Cowboys last year. And Brian Drake's going to tell you why Luther Burden is a player to avoid in fantasy drafts.
And I'm not saying that Luther Burden isn't going to be a good player, Jim. I think he is. He's very explosive in an offense we want pieces of. But I don't want to draft him at his ceiling, and that's what you have to do right now. You're going to take Luther Burden, a guy who last year was the fourth player in first read targets on his own team, and you're going to draft him as their number one receiver. He's going ahead of players like DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, Christian Watson, who we know are the first target on their offense. I just don't feel comfortable drafting a guy who did nothing last year, Jim. Absolutely nothing in terms of finding the end zone. And we're going to say now he's going to ascend and become an alpha wide receiver. It's too big of a price to pay for Luther Burden at this point.
Now, the potential upside. I know we're supposed to ignore what coaches say when they say good things about players in the summer. Ben Johnson seems to wear his heart on his sleeve. He didn't talk up any player as much as he talked up Burden. If Coach Johnson is that invested in Burden, that's where the receiver may be inevitable, getting schemed up touches. But other than that, that's the upside case I find. Brian Drake, quick reminder as to why we're fading Burden.
Well, he couldn't find the field last year. Ben Johnson can talk up all he wants. He ran just 43% of the snaps for Chicago last season. That was behind even Olamide Zacchaeus. Chicago never threw him in the red zone either. He had a 3% end zone target share. That's abysmal. He's a screen merchant, and now I'm going to assume he's going to explode and run this full route tree. I'm not buying it.
And that's the bottom line from Brian Drake. Last year, this was one of the first running backs selected in drafts, but he's much cheaper this year. Tip Major will let you know why you need to draft Saquon Barkley in 2026.
The reason you need to draft Saquon Barkley is because there's 121 vacated targets that were by A.J. Brown, who's no longer there. Yes, I understand that they have Devonta Smith. They got Mekhi Lemon. They've even got great tight end in Dallas Goedert. But I feel like Saquon Barkley is going to be a little bit of a piece in this passing offense with Mannion, who likes to spread the ball around. We know that. But I'm going to give you some nuggets here. Look at what Saquon Barkley does when he's closer to 500 receiving yards. He's been averaging only 277 receiving yards. This year, I think they get him in space and they get him open in open lanes.
When I look at the downside, little concern the offensive line last year with bad health. If that continues, diminished performance, little issue there. No A.J. Brown. I'm a little worried defenses can load the box with defenders more than usual. That's a downside case. But Tip, just remind people quickly why they're drafting Saquon Barkley.
You're drafting Saquon Barkley because of the discount. There's no more Kevin Patullo, everybody. You're drafting him for the value. And if you can get him in the early second round, you got a stud offensive player on your hands, and you partner that with another stud offensive player. It's a bang, bang, win-win situation.
And that's the bottom line from Tip Major. 2025, Brock Bowers dealt with a knee injury, burning fantasy managers who invested in him. Keith Fleming will explain why you must target Bowers in 2026 drafts.
Brock Bowers is, in my opinion, one of the guys going in the early rounds with the most upside. If you look at last season, yes, he did disappoint, but he injured his knee week 1. By the way, he had 5 catches for 102 yards in the 2.5 quarters. He was healthy last season. But it's really about volume and a new situation. Last year, bad offense, bad play calling, bad quarterback play. The Raiders have addressed so many of those issues in the offseason. And we see the new head coach, Kubiak, just last year target 36% of the pass plays to their one elite offensive weapon in the passing game, JSN. I expect him to do something very similar with Bowers this season. And he's just somebody that is going to catch a lot of passes and see a lot of targets. He's projected for 130. Only 10 pass catchers in all the league are projected more.
It's real difficult to come up with a downside for Bowers. The only thing on a potential game-to-game basis, there could be a couple defenses that have so little respect for the wide receivers on the team. They could sell out to stop Bowers. That could limit a week or two, but there is not much in way of downside. Keith, real quick reminder is, again, why you will draft Brock Bowers this year.
He's on a much better offense. And don't forget about a little thing called progression. He averaged 16% of his touchdowns are per touch. That's at 4% right now in the NFL, but it went up from 3 to 7 in year 1 to year 2. I expect it to increase again this season.
And that's the bottom line from Keith Fleming.